The sound of water splashing against worn fabric echoed along the riverbank that September morning in 1878, and Zara Coleman knew she should have brought someone with her. But the shame of washing blood-stained petticoats made solitude worth the risk. Santa Rosa, New Mexico territory, had become increasingly dangerous for a woman alone, especially one whose husband had been dead only 3 months. The morning sun cast long shadows across the shallow waters of the Pecos River, and her hands moved mechanically through the washing, scrubbing at stains that seemed determined to remain as permanent reminders of her loss. She had risen before dawn to make the walk from town, carrying the heavy basket on her hip, her dark hair tied back with a simple ribbon that had seen better days. At 22 years old, Zara had already buried a husband, lost a child in birth, and found herself completely alone in a territory that had little patience for widows without family. The other women in town whispered about her, questioned why she stayed, suggested she should return east to whatever family might take her in. But there was nothing back east, no family waiting with open arms, only the same poverty she had tried to escape by marrying Thomas Coleman 3 years ago. The sound of hoofbeats made her freeze, her hands still submerged in the cold river water. She turned slowly, heart hammering against her ribs, to see a lone rider approaching along the riverbank. The morning light made it difficult to see his features clearly, but she could make out the silhouette of a tall man on a dark horse, a rifle secured to his saddle. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the river was at her back, and her basket of washing represented everything she owned that was worth keeping clean. The rider slowed as he approached, and Zara straightened her spine, refusing to show the fear that coiled in her stomach like a snake. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. His hat was pulled low, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, covered with several days of stubble, and the way he sat his horse spoke of someone comfortable with long days in the saddle. He stopped his horse a respectful distance away and touched the brim of his hat. "Morning, madam. Name is Vance Xavier. I work for the Lazy T Ranch about 15 miles north of here." His voice was deep and steady, with none of the roughness she had learned to associate with the cowboys who drank themselves stupid at the saloon every Saturday night. "I do not mean to startle you, but it is not safe for a lady to be out here alone. There has been trouble along this stretch of river the past few weeks." Zara lifted her chin, determined not to show weakness even as relief flooded through her that he seemed to mean no harm. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Xavier, but I can take care of myself." Something that might have been respect flickered across his features. "I am sure you can, madam, but taking care of yourself gets a lot harder when there are 3 or 4 men with bad intentions. Just 2 days ago, a family heading west was robbed not 5 miles from here. The men took everything, including the daughter. They found her yesterday wandering and she was not in good condition." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She had heard rumors, whispers in the general store, but had dismissed them as the usual exaggerations. "I did not know it was that bad." "It is." Vance Xavier dismounted, moving with an easy grace that suggested he was more comfortable on horseback than on foot, but adapted well to both. "I am not trying to frighten you, madam, just stating facts. If you need to do your washing here, I would be happy to stand guard until you are finished, then escort you back to town. No charge, no expectation of anything, just one human being helping another." Zara studied him carefully, looking for the lie, the angle, the expectation of payment in ways she would never agree to. But his eyes were steady and honest, and there was something about the way he held himself that spoke of integrity. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Because my mother raised me to believe that a man worth his salt helps where he can." He led his horse a few steps closer, then stopped, giving her space. "And because I saw you walking out of town this morning, carrying that basket, and thought to myself that if my sister were alive, I would hope someone would look out for her the same way." The mention of his sister, spoken in the past tense, created an unexpected connection between them. "I am sorry for your loss, as I am for yours." He gestured to the black dress she wore, faded now from multiple washings but still clearly morning attire. "Santa Rosa is small enough that news travels. Thomas Coleman was a good man from what I heard." Zara turned back to her washing, uncertain how to respond. Thomas had been good enough, but their marriage had been one of convenience rather than affection. He had needed someone to cook and clean, and she had needed a roof over her head. His death from pneumonia had been quick, and while she mourned the loss of security, she could not honestly say she mourned the loss of love. There had been kindness between them, but never passion, never the deep connection she had read about in the few books that had crossed her path. "May I at least water my horse?" Vance asked, his tone carefully neutral. The ride from the ranch started early and he could use a drink. "Of course." Zara moved aside, giving the horse access to the river. She watched as Vance led the animal forward, speaking to it in low, gentle tones. The horse was well cared for, its coat glossy despite the dust of travel, and it responded to its rider's touch with obvious trust. They fell into an odd sort of silence, not uncomfortable but charged with awareness. Zara returned to her washing while Vance stood guard, his eyes scanning the surrounding terrain with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to watching for danger. She found herself oddly grateful for his presence, even as part of her bristled at needing protection at all. "How long have you been at the Lazy Tea?" she asked finally, more to break the silence than from genuine curiosity, though once the question was out, she found she did want to know the answer. "Coming up on 4 years now. I signed on after my family's place in Texas got hit by Comanche raiders. Lost my parents, my sister, and the only home I had ever known." He spoke matter-of-factly, but Zara could hear the old pain underneath the words. "The Lazy Tea owner, Tom Brennan, is a fair man. Pays on time, does not work his men to death, and does not tolerate the kind of behavior that gives cowboys a bad name. You are lucky to have found such a place." Zara scrubbed at a particularly stubborn stain, her knuckles white from the effort. "Not everyone in this territory can say the same about their employers." "No, they cannot." Vance's attention was still focused outward, but she could sense he was listening carefully to her words. "What about you, Mrs. Coleman? Do you have work in town?" The question was delicate, acknowledging her situation without being presumptuous. "I take in mending when I can get it, and I help at the bakery 3 days a week. It is enough to keep me in the small room I rent above the seamstress shop. That is good work." He shifted his weight, his hand resting naturally on the pistol at his hip, though not in a threatening way. "Mrs. Henderson at the bakery makes the best apple pie in the territory. I try to stop in whenever I am in town." Zara felt the corner of her mouth twitch in what might have become a smile. "She does. Her secret is cinnamon and a touch of nutmeg, though she would deny it if asked directly. I will keep that secret safe." The warmth in his voice made something flutter in her chest, an unfamiliar sensation that she quickly pushed away. This man was being kind, nothing more, and she would do well to remember that kindness did not equal interest, especially not toward a widow still wearing black. The washing took another 30 minutes, and true to his word, Vance Xavier stood guard the entire time, never once making her feel uncomfortable or indebted. When she had finished and packed the clean, damp clothes back into her basket, He stepped forward. "May I carry that for you?" "It looks heavy, and the walk back to town is not short." Zara's first instinct was to refuse, but the basket was heavy and her arms ached from the scrubbing. "Thank you. That would be appreciated." He took the basket as though it weighed nothing, securing it somehow to his saddle, then turned to her with a question in his eyes. "Would you prefer to ride? We can walk together, or you can ride and I will walk alongside. Whatever makes you most comfortable." The offer was so carefully presented, so mindful of her comfort and reputation, that Zara felt tears prick unexpectedly at her eyes. "Walking is fine. I am not used to horses." They set off together, Vance leading his horse by the reins, matching his pace to hers. The morning sun climbed higher as they walked, and Zara found herself stealing glances at the man beside her. He was tall and lean, with the kind of strength that came from hard work rather than bulk. His hands were scarred and calloused, his face weathered by sun and wind, but there was something almost gentle in the way he moved. "You come into Santa Rosa often?" she asked, then immediately felt foolish for the question. It sounded too much like she hoped to see him again, which was ridiculous considering they had only just met. If Vance noticed her discomfort, he had the grace not to show it. "Once or twice a month, usually to pick up supplies for the ranch. Sometimes more often if Tom needs something special ordered from the railroad depot." He glanced at her, and for the first time, she saw something like uncertainty in his expression. "I could make it more often if there was reason to." The words hung between them, neither quite a question nor quite a statement, but carrying weight nonetheless. Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks, and she looked away, focusing on the dusty path ahead. "I am in mourning, Mr. Xavier." "I am aware of that, madam. And I am not suggesting anything improper." His voice remained steady, respectful. "But mourning does not mean you should be unprotected. If you need to do your washing by the river again, or need help with anything that takes you outside of town, I would consider it an honor to assist. No expectations, no obligations. Just help." Something in Zara's chest cracked open at those words, at the simple offer of help without demands for payment or favors. She had spent so long being strong, being independent, being suspicious of every kindness, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone offer support freely. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You do not know me. I am nobody to you." Vance stopped walking, and after a few steps, Zara stopped too, turning to face him. His expression was serious, intense in a way that made her breath catch. "My sister's name was Victoria. She was 19 when the raiders came, and she died because I was not there to protect her. I was out checking the herd, doing my job, and while I was gone she needed help and there was none." His jaw tightened, old grief evident in every line of his face. "I cannot bring her back, Mrs. Coleman, but I can make sure that other women in need of help receive it. That is why." Zara's throat constricted with emotion. "I am sorry. That is a terrible burden to carry. We all carry burdens." He started walking again, and she fell into step beside him. "The question is whether we let them destroy us or whether we let them make us better people. I choose to try for the latter, though some days are harder than others." They walked in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. As the first buildings of Santa Rosa came into view, Zara felt an unexpected reluctance to see the walk end. There was something peaceful about moving through the morning with this quiet, thoughtful man beside her. Something that felt safe in a way she had not experienced in longer than she could remember. "Mr. Xavier," she said as they reached the edge of town, "I usually do my washing on Saturday mornings. If your offer of escort still stands, I would appreciate the help." The smile that crossed his face was like sunrise, transforming his serious features into something almost beautiful. "It stands, Mrs. Coleman. I will be at the edge of town near the livery at first light this Saturday, and please call me Vance. Mr. Xavier makes me feel like I should be teaching school or selling insurance." Despite everything, Zara felt herself smile in return. "Then you should call me Zara. Mrs. Coleman makes me feel much older than 22. Zara." He said her name carefully, as though testing how it felt in his mouth. "It suits you, strong and distinctive." He retrieved her basket from his saddle and handed it to her, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The contact was electric, unexpected, and from the way his eyes widened slightly, she thought he might have felt it too. "Until Saturday, then," she said, stepping back, needing distance to clear her head. "Until Saturday." He mounted his horse with easy grace, then touched his hat brim once more. "Stay safe, Zara." She watched him ride away, heading toward the general store, her heart doing strange things in her chest. Around her, she could feel the eyes of the town on her, the whispers starting already. Widow Coleman, talking with a strange cowboy at the edge of town. There would be speculation, judgment, and probably a visit from Mrs. Henderson with concerned questions about reputation. But as Zara carried her basket of clean washing up the narrow stairs to her small room above the seamstress shop, she found she did not care as much as she should have about what the town thought. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt something other than numb survival. She felt anticipation, hope, and the faintest flutter of possibility. The room she rented was small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small table with one chair. A single window looked out over the main street, and a hook on the back of the door held her other dress, as black as the one she wore. It was not much, but it was hers, paid for with her own work, and that mattered. She hung the washing on the rope she had strung across one corner of the room, then sank onto her bed, suddenly exhausted. The morning had been emotionally draining in ways she had not expected. Meeting Vance Xavier had shaken something loose inside her, made her remember that she was more than just a widow struggling to survive. She was a woman, young still, with feelings and needs she had pushed down so deep she had almost forgotten they existed. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Zara opened it to find Mrs. Henderson, the bakery owner, standing in the narrow hallway. She was a stout woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a tendency to mother everyone within reach. "I saw you coming back into town, Mrs. Henderson said without preamble. "That was Vance Xavier you were with. Good man, that one. Honest and hardworking, not like some of the cowboys who come through town." Zara stepped back, allowing the older woman to enter. There was barely room for both of them, but Mrs. Henderson made herself comfortable on the single chair while Zara perched on the edge of the bed. "He found me washing clothes by the river and offered his protection. Apparently, there has been trouble along that stretch." Mrs. Henderson nodded gravely. "There has. Bad business, that." "You should not go alone anymore, dear. It is not safe. Mr. Xavier offered to escort me on Saturday mornings." Zara waited for the lecture about reputation, about the impropriety of a mourning widow spending time with a man. Instead, Mrs. Henderson surprised her. "Good. Accept his help, Zara. You have been alone long enough, and while I know the town expects you to mourn for a full year, Thomas would not have wanted you to put your life at risk for the sake of appearances." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "And before you say anything, I knew Thomas Coleman since he was a boy. He married you because he needed practical help, and you married him for the same reason. There is no shame in that, but there is also no reason to pretend his death left you heartbroken. Sad, yes. Alone, certainly, but not devastated by lost love." The words were so close to Zara's own thoughts that she felt tears spring to her eyes. Is it wrong that I do not miss him the way a wife should miss a husband? No, dear, it is honest. Mrs. Henderson reached over and patted her hand. You gave Thomas comfort in his last years, and he gave you security. That was the agreement between you, and you both honored it. But that does not mean you need to spend the rest of your life alone. When you are ready, and when the right man comes along, do not let guilt or what the town thinks stop you from finding happiness. Zara wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I just met him, Mrs. Henderson. One conversation does not make him the right man. No, but it is a start. The older woman pushed herself to her feet. I just wanted to make sure you were all right and to tell you that I need you at the bakery tomorrow morning at 5. We have a big order to fill for the restaurant. I will be there. Zara stood as well, seeing her to the door. And Mrs. Henderson. Thank you. Nothing to thank me for, dear, just speaking truth. She paused in the doorway. That Vance Xavier, he lost his whole family about 4 years back. Terrible tragedy, but he has never let it make him bitter or mean. That says a lot about a man's character. After Mrs. Henderson left, Zara stood at her window, looking out at the dusty street below. She could see the general store where Vance had presumably gone to conduct business for his ranch. Part of her hoped to catch another glimpse of him, while another part told her she was being ridiculous, acting like a schoolgirl rather than a grown woman who knew better than to pin hopes on a stranger. But he had not felt like a stranger, that was the thing. Standing by the river with him, walking back to town, their conversation had felt natural, easy in a way that talking to Thomas never had been. She and her late husband had been cordial, considerate, but never truly connected. They had shared a home but not their inner thoughts, their fears, or their dreams. The days until Saturday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Zara worked at the bakery, took in mending, and tried not to count the hours until she would see Vance Xavier again. She told herself repeatedly that she was being foolish, that he probably helped women all the time and thought nothing special of her, that she was building castles in the air based on one act of kindness. But Thursday afternoon, while she was helping Mrs. Henderson close the bakery, a young man in dusty work clothes came in just before they locked the door. "Excuse me, madam," he said, addressing Zara directly. "Are you Mrs. Coleman?" "I am." Zara exchanged a glance with Mrs. Henderson, uncertain what this was about. The young man pulled a small wrapped package from his saddlebag. "Mr. Xavier from the Lazy Tea asked me to deliver this to you. I was heading into town anyway, so it was no trouble." He handed her the package and left before she could ask any questions. Mrs. Henderson practically vibrated with curiosity as Zara carefully unwrapped the brown paper. Inside was a small bar of fine milled soap, the kind that came from back east and cost more than she would ever spend on herself, and a folded piece of paper. The note was short, written in a surprisingly elegant hand. "Thought this might make washing day a bit easier. See you Saturday at first light. Vance." "Oh my," Mrs. Henderson breathed, reading over Zara's shoulder. "That man is courting you, dear. He cannot be. I am in mourning." But even as Zara said the words, her heart was racing, and she could not stop the smile that spread across her face. Mourning does not make you dead, just respectfully waiting. Mrs. Henderson squeezed her shoulder. "And that is a very thoughtful gift, practical but personal. The mark of a man who pays attention." That night, Zara lay in her narrow bed, holding the soap and breathing in its delicate lavender scent. The gift was indeed thoughtful, chosen specifically for her circumstances, acknowledging her need to wash clothes without being presumptuous or overly intimate. It showed that Vance had been thinking about her, had taken time from his busy ranch work to arrange for its delivery. She fell asleep with possibilities dancing through her mind, feeling more alive than she had in years. Saturday morning arrived with a brilliant sunrise that painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. Zara dressed carefully in her black dress, braided her long, dark hair, and collected her basket of washing. The new soap was tucked carefully at the bottom, and she found herself hurrying more than necessary as she made her way through the quiet streets toward the livery stable. Vance was already there, sitting astride his dark horse, and the smile that lit his face when he saw her made her breath catch in her throat. He dismounted immediately, coming to take her basket. "Good morning, Zara. I hope the week treated you well." "It did. Thank you for the soap." "That was very kind." She was acutely aware of how formal they sounded, like actors in a play reading lines, when what she wanted was the easy conversation they had shared before. As though reading her thoughts, Vance secured her basket and gestured toward the river trail. "Shall we? And perhaps you can tell me more about your work at the bakery. Mrs. Henderson spoke highly of you when I stopped in yesterday." The knot of tension in Zara's chest loosened. He had stopped at the bakery, had asked about her, had gotten Mrs. Henderson's approval, all without making a show of it. "She is a good woman, fair and kind, which is not always easy to find." They fell into step together, the early morning air cool and fresh. This time, the silence between them was comfortable, companionable. And when Vance started telling her about a mishap at the ranch involving a stubborn bull and a broken fence, she found herself laughing in a way she had not done in longer than she could remember. "You should have seen Jake trying to explain to Tom how the bull ended up in the vegetable garden," Vance said, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "He kept saying it was not his fault, while standing there covered in mud and holding the remains of the fence post." "Was anyone hurt?" Zara asked, concerned despite her laughter. "Only Jake's pride, and the vegetable garden, but it was near the end of the season anyway." Vance shifted the horse's reins to his other hand. "Tom made Jake responsible for replanting in the spring, which I think Jake is already regretting, though it is months away." They reached the river, and this time, Zara felt no fear at the isolation, only peaceful contentment. Vance took up his guard position while she began her washing, and for a while, they simply existed together in comfortable silence. But unlike last week, this silence felt different, charged with awareness and the beginning of something neither of them had quite named. "Tell me about Texas," Zara said suddenly, needing to know more about this man who had so quickly become important to her. "What was your life like before?" Vance was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "It was good. Hard work, but good. My father raised cattle, and we had a small but profitable operation. My mother kept the house and a garden that was the envy of the county. Victoria, my sister, was learning to be a teacher. She loved books, loved learning, wanted to share that with children. She sounds wonderful." Zara scrubbed at the clothes in her hands, giving him space to talk or not as he chose. She was stubborn as a mule, passionate about everything she cared about, and absolutely fearless in a way that sometimes terrified my parents. His voice softened with memory. "She used to sneak books from our father's study and read them to me by candlelight after everyone else was asleep. That is how I learned to read well, listening to Victoria read everything from Shakespeare to dime novels." "Your father had Shakespeare?" Zara turned to look at him, surprised. Vance smiled slightly. "My father was full of surprises. He came west from Boston, much to his family's dismay. He had a full education but wanted a different life than the one laid out for him. He taught all of us to value learning, even while working with our hands." "What happened the day of the raid?" The question was bold, perhaps too bold, but Zara wanted to understand the shadows that sometimes crossed his face. I was out checking fence lines in the far pasture. It was my job that day, and I took it seriously, maybe too seriously. I was gone from dawn until almost dusk, and when I rode back, I saw the smoke first. His voice remained steady, but she could hear the old pain underneath. By the time I got there, it was over. The raiders were gone and my family was dead. Victoria had been shot trying to protect our mother. Our father died fighting to defend them. Mother died in the house fire they set. Zara abandoned her washing, moving to stand beside him. Without thinking about propriety or what was proper, she reached out and took his hand. "I am so sorry, Vance. No one should have to endure that." His fingers closed around hers, holding tight. I buried them on the land they loved, said words over their graves that probably were not enough, and then I burned what was left of the house. I could not bear the thought of someone else living there, walking through rooms where my family had been happy. Then I just rode for days, until I ran out of territory I knew and ended up in New Mexico. And found the Lazy T. And Tom Brennan, who took one look at me and said I looked like I needed a job and a reason to keep living. He was right on both counts. Vance looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. For 4 years I worked hard, sent money to churches and schools in Victoria's memory, and told myself that work was enough. That surviving was enough. And then I saw a woman walking out of town alone with a basket of washing, and something shifted. Zara's heart was racing so fast she thought it might beat out of her chest. Shifted how? I started remembering what it felt like to want more than just survival, what it felt like to look forward to something, to someone. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, the touch gentle and questioning. "I know you are in mourning, Zara, and I know it has only been a week since we met. I am not asking for anything you cannot give, but I want you to know that my interest is genuine. When I offered my name and protection, I meant it in every way." The words hung between them, a declaration and a promise all at once. Zara knew she should step back, should remember propriety and mourning periods, and all the rules society had laid down for widows. But standing there by the river, her hand in his, she felt more alive than she had in her entire marriage. "Thomas and I were never in love," she heard herself say, the truth spilling out. "We cared for each other, but it was an arrangement of convenience for us both. I do not regret marrying him because he gave me safety when I needed it, but I also do not need to pretend our marriage was something it was not." "And what do you need, Zara?" Vance's voice was low, intense. "What do you want?" The question was enormous, encompassing so much more than the moment. What did she want? For so long her wants had been simple: food, shelter, safety. But now, standing here with this man who looked at her like she mattered, she realized her wants had expanded into dangerous territory. "I want to know you," she said finally. "I want time to see if this feeling between us is real or just two lonely people finding comfort. I want to not feel guilty for wanting anything at all. Then we will take time." Vance brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent heat racing through her entire body. "I will come every Saturday to escort you to the river. We will talk, get to know each other, and let whatever this is develop at its own pace. Does that sound acceptable?" "Yes." The word came out barely above a whisper, but it felt like a shout, a declaration, a step forward into unknown territory that was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. They stood there for another moment, hands clasped, the morning sun warming their faces, before Zara reluctantly stepped back. "I should finish the washing before we draw too much attention." Vance released her hand slowly, as though reluctant to break the connection. "Of course, I will keep watch." The rest of the washing passed in a blur of jumbled thoughts and racing feelings. When they walked back to town, everything looked the same, but Zara felt fundamentally changed. They had crossed some invisible line, moved from strangers to something more, and there was no going back. As they reached the edge of town, Vance handed her the basket with obvious reluctance. "Same time next Saturday, same time." Zara took the basket, her fingers brushing his once more. "Be safe, Vance." "You too, Zara, always." She watched him ride away, then turned to find Mrs. Henderson standing on the bakery's porch, a knowing smile on her face. The older woman said nothing, just nodded approvingly before going back inside, and Zara felt a rush of gratitude for her discretion and support. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that became the highlight of Zara's existence. Every Saturday, Vance would be waiting at the edge of town at first light. They would walk to the river together. She would do her washing while he kept watch, and they would talk about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of their lives, their thoughts, their dreams. She learned that he wanted to have his own ranch someday, that he loved the early morning when the world was quiet, that he had a weakness for cherry pie and could not stand coffee that was not strong enough to strip paint. He learned that she had always wanted to learn to read better, that she missed her mother who had died when she was 12, that she dreamed of someday having a garden full of flowers that served no purpose except beauty. The conversations grew deeper, more personal. In the third week, Vance brought a book, one of the ones his sister had loved, and began reading to her while she washed. His voice was rich and expressive, bringing the words to life in ways that made her forget the cold water and aching hands. In the fourth week, she brought extra food from the bakery, and they shared a simple breakfast by the river, laughing over shared jokes and growing increasingly comfortable in each other's presence. By the sixth week, Zara realized she was in love. The realization came quietly, not as a thunderbolt but as a gentle unfolding of certainty. She loved the way Vance looked at her, as though she was something precious. She loved his quiet strength, his thoughtfulness, the way he respected her boundaries while making his feelings clear. She loved his stories, his rare smiles, the way his eyes lit up when he saw her. It was October now, and the mornings had grown colder. Vance had started bringing an extra blanket for her to wrap around her shoulders while she worked, and the simple thoughtfulness of the gesture made her heart ache in the best possible way. "Winter is coming," he said one Saturday morning as they sat by the river after her washing was done. "Soon the river will be too cold for this, and there will be snow on the ground." "I know." Zara huddled into the blanket, aware that their Saturday mornings were numbered, at least in their current form. "I have been trying not to think about it." Vance was quiet for a moment, then shifted closer to her on the fallen log where they sat. "Zara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." Her heart began to race. "All right. You know how I feel about you. I have not hidden it, and I do not intend to start now. These past weeks, getting to know you, have been the best of my life since before I lost my family." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I know it has only been 5 months since Thomas died, and by all rights you should still be in full mourning. But I also know what you have told me about your marriage, and I know what I feel." "Vance, what are you asking?" She could barely breathe, hope and fear warring in her chest. "I want to court you properly. Not these stolen Saturday mornings, but real courting. Dinners, church socials, walks through town where everyone can see. I want to make my intentions known, and I want to give you the time to be sure of your feelings without hiding or feeling guilty." His hand found hers under the blanket. "But I need to know if that is something you would want, if I am something you would want." Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks, and she made no move to wipe them away. "Yes. Yes, I want that. I want you. These Saturdays have been wonderful, but I want more too. I want to be able to tell people about you, to not have to hide that you make me happier than I have ever been." The smile that broke across Vance's face was like sunshine. "Then we will start today. I will speak to Mrs. Henderson, ask her to act as chaperone when needed. I will make my intentions clear to anyone who asks, and in time, when the mourning period has passed and you are ready, I will ask you another question." Zara knew what question he meant, and the knowledge sent warmth flooding through her. "The town will talk. Let them. I have never lived my life according to what others thought I should do, and I am not about to start now." Vance stood, pulling her up with him. "But I will do this right, Zara. I will court you with respect for your reputation and your feelings. I will be patient and proper and everything I should be, even when what I want is to pull you into my arms and never let go." The longing in his voice matched the longing in her heart. "Someday you can," she whispered, "when the time is right." "Someday," he agreed. "But for now, let me walk you back to town in broad daylight, carrying your basket, showing everyone that you have a man who cares for you." And he did exactly that. They walked back to Santa Rosa side by side, not touching but close enough that their intent was clear. People stared, whispered, but Vance kept his head high, and Zara took strength from his certainty. At the bakery, he handed her the basket and then, in full view of anyone watching, took her hand and bowed over it. "Thank you for a wonderful morning, Zara. May I call on you Tuesday evening? Perhaps we could take a walk, with Mrs. Henderson's company." "I would like that very much, Vance." Zara's voice was steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway as though she had been waiting, which she probably had been. "Tuesday evening would be fine, Mr. Xavier. I will be happy to accompany you both." Over the next weeks, Vance courted Zara with a determination and romance that became the talk of Santa Rosa. He called on her twice a week, always with Mrs. Henderson present, always respectful and proper. But he also brought small gifts: wildflowers before the first frost killed them, a book he thought she would enjoy, a warm shawl for the growing cold. They attended church together, with Zara sitting between Vance and Mrs. Henderson, enduring the stares and whispers with dignity. Some people were supportive, smiling at the young couple and wishing them well. Others were scandalized, muttering about proper mourning periods and indecent haste. Zara learned to ignore the latter, focusing instead on the former and on the steady, reassuring presence of Vance beside her. In November, the first snow fell, and Zara's Saturday washing trips to the river ended. Instead, Vance helped her find a way to do her washing inside, bringing large buckets of water up to her room and then later helping her carry them down to dump. It was harder work, but it meant he could visit her more often, always properly chaperoned, always correct in his behavior. But there were moments, stolen seconds, when Mrs. Henderson was momentarily distracted, or had stepped out of the room when Vance would reach for Zara's hand, or brush a strand of hair from her face, or look at her with such longing that she felt it in her very soul. Those moments sustained her, promised her that the patience they were exercising would be worth it. December brought bitter cold and the approach of Christmas. Tom Brennan, Vance's employer, came into town one Saturday, and Vance brought him to meet Zara. Tom was a weathered man in his 50s, with keen eyes that missed nothing, and after talking with Zara for 30 minutes over coffee at the restaurant, he pronounced her sensible and strong, which is exactly what Vance needs. "I want you to know," Tom said seriously, addressing Zara directly, "that Vance Xavier is the finest man I have ever had the privilege to employ. He is honest, hardworking, and loyal to a fault. He has also been alone too long, carrying grief that would have destroyed a lesser man. You have given him something to live for beyond just surviving, and I am grateful to you for that." The words moved Zara deeply, confirming what she already knew in her heart. "He has done the same for me, Mr. Brennan." I did not realize I had been merely surviving until he showed me what truly living could be. Tom nodded approvingly. "I am increasing his wages, effective immediately. And I want you both to know that when the time comes, when you are ready to marry, there is a small house on the ranch property that needs occupants. It was built for a foreman I had hoped to hire, but it has stood empty for 2 years. It is yours if you want it, as a wedding present and a place to build your life together." Zara felt tears spring to her eyes. "Mr. Brennan, that is extraordinarily generous." "It is practical," Tom corrected, but his eyes were kind. "I need Vance at the ranch, but I also know he is thinking about starting his own place someday. This gives you both time to save money, build your future, without struggling the way young couples often do. And selfishly, it keeps my best worker close for a while longer." Vance was speechless, clearly moved beyond words. When he finally found his voice, it was rough with emotion. "Tom, I do not know how to thank you. Marry this woman, have babies, build a good life, and be happy. That is all the thanks I need." Tom stood, shaking both their hands. "And when you do decide to start your own ranch, I will help you find the right land at the right price. But that is years down the road. For now, focus on courting this lady properly." After Tom left, Vance and Zara sat in stunned silence, Mrs. Henderson beaming at them from across the table. "That man has a heart of gold," the older woman said. "And he is right. You two are meant for each other, and now you have the means to make a real future together." Christmas came, and Vance gave Zara a beautiful wool cloak, deep blue instead of black, a subtle encouragement to begin leaving mourning behind. She gave him a scarf she had knitted herself, working on it late at night by candlelight, each stitch a prayer for his safety and happiness. They exchanged gifts at the church Christmas social, surrounded by the community that had slowly come to accept their courtship. As the new year of 1879 arrived, Zara made a decision. She went to the seamstress shop where she rented her room and asked for dark gray fabric instead of black. Her full mourning period was technically not over, but she was moving into half mourning, a signal to everyone that she was ready to move forward with her life. When Vance saw her in the new gray dress, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His eyes widened, then filled with such love and longing that she felt her knees weaken. "You look beautiful," he said simply, "like the first break of dawn after a long night." They were in the bakery, Mrs. Henderson present but pointedly focused on her baking, giving them a moment of privacy. Vance took Zara's hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in the gesture that had become familiar and cherished. "Zara, it has been 7 months since Thomas passed, and nearly 4 months since I began courting you properly. I know it is still earlier than society deems appropriate, but I also know what is in my heart, and I believe I know what is in yours." He took a deep breath. "I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination to build a good life despite everything you have lost. I love the way you laugh, the way you think, the way you see the world. I want to spend every day of the rest of my life showing you how much I love you." Zara could barely breathe, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too, Vance, so much it sometimes frightens me. Then marry me." The words were simple, direct, full of hope. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon, as soon as you are ready. I have Tom's permission to use the house on the ranch. I have saved money. I can give you a good life, Zara. Maybe not a fancy one, but a life full of love and partnership and everything we both deserve." "Yes." The word came out as barely more than a whisper, but then she said it again, louder, more certain. "Yes, Vance Xavier, I will marry you. I will build a life with you and love you for as long as we both live." Vance pulled her into his arms right there in the bakery, propriety forgotten, and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and fierce all at once, a promise and a celebration, and when they finally broke apart, Mrs. Henderson was crying happy tears and clapping her hands. "About time," the older woman said, laughing through her tears. "I thought I was going to have to lock you two in a room together just to get you to admit what everyone else could see from a mile away." They set the wedding date for early March, giving Zara a full 9 months of widowhood and time to prepare. The town buzzed with news of the engagement, and while some people still clucked their tongues about indecent haste, most were happy for the young couple who had found love in the midst of loss and hardship. Zara gave up her room above the seamstress shop and moved in with Mrs. Henderson for the final weeks before the wedding. It was more proper, gave her help with wedding preparations, and saved her the rent money she could put toward her future. She worked extra hours at the bakery, saving every penny, and spent her evenings sewing a new dress for the wedding. Not white, which would have been inappropriate for a widow, but a beautiful dove gray silk that Mrs. Henderson had produced from some mysterious source and insisted Zara accept as a gift. Vance came into town every Sunday after church, and they would take long walks, properly chaperoned, talking about their future. They planned where furniture would go in the little house, discussed what vegetables to plant in the garden come spring, and dreamed together about the children they hoped to have. "I want at least 3, Vance said one cold February afternoon as they walked along the edge of town. "Enough so they always have playmates, never have to be alone the way Victoria and I sometimes were." "3 sounds perfect," Zara agreed, her hand tucked into the crook of his elbow. "And I want to teach them to read, really read, so they can discover all the worlds that exist in books." "We will have a library," Vance promised. "Maybe just a few books at first, but we will add to it every year, and on winter nights we will all sit together, and I will read to them the way Victoria read to me." The tenderness in his voice when he spoke of his sister never failed to move Zara. "She would be happy for you, Vance. Happy that you found love again. I hope so. I like to think she is watching, approving." He stopped walking, turning to face Zara. "You have given me back my life, did you know that? For 4 years I was just going through motions, existing but not really living. And then you were there by the river, stubborn and proud and refusing to show fear, and something in me woke up. You saved me too," Zara said softly. "I was so alone, Vance. So tired of struggling, of being afraid, of wondering how much longer I could keep going. And then you offered your name and protection, and everything changed." They stood there in the fading afternoon light, the future stretching before them full of promise. The wedding was only 3 weeks away, and then their life together would truly begin. The night before the wedding, Mrs. Henderson hosted a small dinner for Zara, inviting the few women in town who had become friends. They laughed, shared advice both practical and ridiculous, and celebrated the new chapter Zara was about to begin. As the evening wound down and the guests departed, Mrs. Henderson pulled Zara aside. "I want you to know how proud I am of you," the older woman said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You came to this town alone and afraid, and you built a life through sheer determination. Now you are choosing to share that life with a good man, and I have no doubt you will both be very happy. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Henderson, for the work, the support, the friendship. I could not have survived without you." Zara hugged the older woman tightly. "Nonsense. You would have found a way. You are a survivor, Zara, but I am glad I could help make the path a little easier." Mrs. Henderson pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is a big day, and you want to look your best when you become Mrs. Vance Xavier." Zara lay in bed that night, too excited to sleep, thinking about all that had led to this moment. If someone had told her a year ago that she would be happy, genuinely excited about the future, she would not have believed them. But here she was, on the eve of her wedding, more certain of her choices than she had ever been of anything. The morning of March 15th dawned clear and cold, with brilliant sunshine that made the lingering snow sparkle like diamonds. Zara dressed carefully in her dove-gray silk dress, and Mrs. Henderson helped arrange her dark hair in an elegant style, weaving in small white flowers that had been forced to bloom early in someone's hothouse. The ceremony was held in the small church in Santa Rosa, with nearly the entire town in attendance. Tom Brennan stood up as Vance's best man, and Mrs. Henderson stood with Zara. As Zara walked down the aisle, her eyes found Vance waiting at the altar, and the look on his face took her breath away. He was wearing a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed, but it was the expression in his eyes that mattered. Pure love, joy, and promise. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for all the days of their lives. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vance kissed her gently, reverently, and the congregation erupted in applause. The reception was held at the restaurant, with food donated by half the town. There was music, dancing, and celebration, and through it all, Vance never let go of Zara's hand. They were surrounded by people wishing them well, offering advice and blessings, but Zara was most aware of her husband beside her, solid and real and hers. As the afternoon waned, Tom Brennan approached them with a wagon. "I figured you two would want to get home before dark," he said with a knowing smile. "Your house is ready, fire laid in the hearth, food in the pantry, everything you need to start your life together." Vance shook his employer's hand, emotion clear on his face. "Thank you, Tom, for everything. Just be happy, both of you, that is all I ask." Tom helped Zara into the wagon, then handed the reins to Vance. "I will see you Monday morning, Vance, but take tomorrow to settle in. You have earned it." The ride to the Lazy T Ranch took about 2 hours, with the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Zara sat close to Vance on the wagon seat, her hand in his, watching the landscape roll by. When they finally arrived at the ranch, Vance drove past the main house and several outbuildings to a small, neat cottage set slightly apart from the others. "This is ours," he said, helping her down from the wagon. "Our home, Zara." She took in the simple wood structure with its covered porch and stone chimney. It was small but well built, and through the windows she could see lamplight already glowing, evidence of Tom's thoughtfulness. "It is perfect." Vance lifted her into his arms, making her laugh with surprise. "Then let me carry my wife over the threshold of our first home together." He carried her inside, kicking the door closed behind them, and Zara looked around in wonder. The main room held a simple but sturdy table with chairs, a rocking chair by the hearth, and shelves that already held a few books. Through an open door she could see a bedroom with a large bed covered in a beautiful quilt, and beyond that, a small kitchen. "Tom did all this?" she asked, tears pricking at her eyes. "Tom and some of the ranch hands and Mrs. Henderson and about half of Santa Rosa." Vance set her gently on her feet but kept his arms around her. "Everyone wanted to help us start our life together, right?" Zara turned in his embrace, looking up at the man who was now her husband. "I love you, Vance Xavier. Thank you for offering your name and protection that morning by the river. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me when I felt invisible to the world. I love you, Zara Xavier." He said her new name with reverence. "Thank you for trusting me with your heart, for giving me a reason to live instead of just survive. Thank you for choosing me." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and she responded with equal fervor. There was no need for words as they moved together toward the bedroom, toward the life they would build together, toward a future full of love and promise. The next morning, Zara woke in her husband's arms, sunshine streaming through the bedroom window. Vance was already awake, watching her with an expression of such tenderness that it made her heart ache in the best possible way. "Good morning, wife," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Good morning, husband." She stretched, feeling gloriously happy and completely at peace. "What time do you need to be at work?" "Tom gave me the day, remember? We have the whole day to ourselves." Vance ran his hand gently down her arm. "I thought we could explore the ranch. I could show you around, introduce you to the other hands and their families. Make this place feel like home." They spent the day doing exactly that. Vance introduced her to the other cowboys, most of them young and polite, clearly having been warned to be on their best behavior around the boss's favorite employee's new wife. She met Tom's wife, Elena, a warm Mexican woman who immediately insisted Zara call her by her first name and promised to help her learn the ways of ranch life. Over the following weeks and months, Zara settled into her new life with a happiness that still sometimes surprised her. She kept their little house, cooked meals for Vance, and began the garden she had dreamed of. She made friends among the other ranch wives, joined in community gatherings, and slowly became part of the fabric of ranch life. Vance was everything a husband should be and more. He worked hard during the day but always came home for dinner, never took her for granted, and showed his love in countless small ways. He brought her wildflowers, helped with heavy chores without being asked, and read to her in the evenings just as he had promised, his voice wrapping around her like a warm blanket. In June, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Vance on a warm evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He pulled her into his arms, tears streaming down his face, and held her as though she was the most precious thing in the world. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Zara asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. Happy does not begin to cover it. Vance pulled back to look at her, his hands gently cupping her face. "You have given me everything, Zara. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I do not have words for what I am feeling." "Then show me," she whispered, and he did, carrying her inside and making love to her with such tenderness that she cried from the sheer emotion of it. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Vance was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He fretted when she lifted anything heavier than a plate, insisted she rest more than she wanted to, and drove Alina and Mrs. Henderson crazy with his constant questions about what was normal and what he should be worried about. "That man loves you something fierce," Alina said one afternoon when she had come to visit and found Vance building a cradle in their front room. "I have been around many men in my life, and I have never seen one so devoted to his wife." "I am lucky," Zara agreed, watching Vance work with his usual careful precision. "We both are. Neither of us expected to find this kind of love, and now that we have it, we do not take a single moment for granted." In February of 1880, on a cold night with snow falling softly outside, Zara went into labor. Vance was beside himself with worry, pacing the small house while Alina and Mrs. Henderson, who had ridden out from town specifically for this occasion, tended to Zara. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Zara wondered if she had the strength to continue. But every time doubt crept in, she would hear Vance's voice from the other room, and it gave her the courage to push forward. Finally, as dawn was breaking, their son was born. He came into the world wailing his displeasure at the cold and the light, and Zara fell instantly and completely in love. Mrs. Henderson cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket before placing him in Zara's arms. "You have a son," she said, smiling through tears. "A beautiful, healthy son." Elena went to get Vance, who burst into the room as though he had been shot from a cannon. He stopped abruptly at the sight of Zara holding their baby, his expression transforming into something beyond words. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and knelt beside the bed. "Our son," Zara said softly, shifting so he could see the tiny face. "Would you like to hold him?" Vance held out his arms, and Zara carefully transferred the precious bundle. Her strong, capable husband held their son as though he might break, tears streaming unchecked down his face. "He is perfect," Vance whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Zara asked, watching the two most important people in her world. Vance looked at her, then back at the baby. "I would like to name him Thomas, for Tom Brennan, who gave us the chance to build this life. And his middle name should be Victor for Victoria. What do you think? Thomas Victor Xavier." Zara tried out the name, finding it fit perfectly. "I love it. Tommy for short, until he is old enough to demand we use his full name." They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them together, while Elena and Mrs. Henderson quietly cleaned up and then left them in peace. Vance carefully handed Tommy back to Zara, then climbed onto the bed beside them, wrapping his arms around his family. "I never thought I could be this happy again," he said quietly. "After I lost everything in Texas, I thought the best I could hope for was to survive, to get through each day without the pain destroying me. And now look at us. A wife I love beyond measure, a son who is healthy and perfect, a home, a future. You gave me all of this, Zara." "We gave it to each other," she corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You saved me just as much as I saved you. We built this together." The years that followed were full and happy. Tommy grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. Vance continued to work for Tom Brennan, but he also started saving seriously toward buying his own land, his own ranch. Tom helped him find opportunities, taught him everything about running a successful operation, and treated him more like a son than an employee. In 1882, Zara gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Rose, who brought chaos and joy in equal measure. Vance was utterly devoted to all three children, spending every moment he could with them, teaching them to ride, reading to them every night, showing them the same love and attention his own parents had shown him. The little house on the Lazy T became too small, and with Tom's blessing, Vance expanded it, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Zara's garden flourished, full of vegetables to feed their growing family and flowers that served no purpose except to make her smile. She had never been happier, never felt more fulfilled, never imagined that life could be this good. In 1885, when Tommy was 5 and the twins were 3, Vance came home one evening with news that made Zara's heart soar. "Tom found us land," he said, picking her up and spinning her around despite her laughing protests. 500 acres, 20 miles north with a river running through it and enough grass to support a good-sized herd. "The owner is selling because he is moving back east, and Tom negotiated a price we can afford. Our own ranch." Zara could hardly believe it. "Truly, truly. We have saved enough for a down payment, and Tom is willing to help us with the rest. We can start small, build it up over time." "It will be hard work, Zara. Harder than anything we have done before, but it will be ours. Then let us do it." Zara cupped his face in her hands. "Let us build our dream together." They named their ranch the Rising Sun, for the new beginning it represented, and for the hope that had brought them together. The first year was brutally hard, with Vance working from before dawn until after dark, building structures, managing cattle, and establishing their operation. Zara worked just as hard, caring for the children, maintaining their home, and helping with the ranch work whenever she could. But they did it together, supporting each other through the difficult times, celebrating the successes, and never losing sight of what mattered most: their love and their family. Tom Brennan remained a close friend and mentor, and Mrs. Henderson, now well into her 60s, visited regularly, marveling at how far the scared young widow who had washed clothes by the river had come. In 1887, Zara gave birth to another son, whom they named Benjamin. He was a calm, thoughtful baby, content to watch the world with serious eyes that reminded Zara of how Vance had looked that first morning by the river, offering his name and protection to a stranger. The Rising Sun Ranch grew and prospered. Vance proved to have his father's business sense and his own hard-earned wisdom about cattle and land management. Their herd increased, their land was well maintained, and they gained a reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock. They hired hands to help with the work, paying fair wages and treating everyone with respect, building the kind of operation Vance had always dreamed of. Tommy grew into a capable young man, learning ranching from his father and showing every sign of being an excellent cattleman himself. The twins, Emma and Rose, were as different as night and day, but both were smart and capable, helping their mother with the endless work of running a household on an active ranch. Benjamin showed an early interest in books, and Vance made sure to feed that interest, bringing him volumes from Santa Rosa and teaching him to love learning as Victoria had taught Vance. In 1890, on a warm September morning much like the one 12 years earlier when they had first met, Vance and Zara rode out to their favorite spot on the ranch. It was a small rise that overlooked much of their property, with a view that stretched for miles. They often came here together, to talk, to plan, or simply to enjoy each other's company away from the demands of ranch life and 4 active children. "You ever think about that morning by the river?" Vance asked, his arm around Zara's shoulders as they sat on the grass, the horses grazing nearby. "All the time." Zara leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers. "I think about how scared I was, how alone I felt, how I was just trying to survive one day at a time. And I think about how I almost did not ride that way," Vance said. "I had planned to check a different section of fence, but something made me change my mind. Divine intervention, maybe, or just incredible luck. I prefer to think it was fate." Zara tilted her face up to look at him. "We were meant to find each other, Vance. 2 people who had lost everything, who had every reason to give up, but who chose to keep going. And because we kept going, we found this." She gestured at the view before them, but they both knew she meant more than just the land. She meant their children, their love, the life they had built from nothing but determination and hope. "I love you, Zara Xavier." Vance said it as seriously and sincerely as he had the first time, all those years ago. "You are still the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. Marrying you was the best decision of my life. I love you too, Vance Xavier. You gave me everything I did not even know I needed: safety, love, partnership, and a life beyond my wildest dreams." Zara kissed him softly. "Thank you for offering your name and protection that day. Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for building this with me." They sat there for a long time, watching the sun climb higher, thinking about all they had survived and all they had created. In the distance, they could see their ranch house, larger now than the little cottage on the Lazy T had been, smoke rising from the chimney where their children were undoubtedly starting to wonder when their parents would return for lunch. "We should head back," Vance said eventually, though he made no move to stand. Tommy wanted help with that new fence section, and the girls said something about making apple pie if I would get them more apples from town. And Benjamin needs more books. He has read everything we have at least twice. Zara smiled, thinking of her serious younger son. He asked me this morning if he might become a teacher someday. Like Victoria wanted to be. Vance's voice was soft, contemplative. I think she would have liked that. Knowing her name lives on, and that our son might follow a path similar to hers. I think she would have liked all of this. Zara stood, pulling Vance up with her. Your happiness, our family, the life you have built. You honored her memory by living well, Vance. That is the greatest tribute you could have given her. They rode back to the house together, side by side as they had ridden through life, meeting challenges together, celebrating victories together, and loving each other through it all. Their children ran out to meet them, full of questions and needs and the boundless energy of youth, and Vance and Zara exchanged a smile over their heads. This was their legacy, not just land or cattle or material success, but these 4 lives they had created and nurtured together. The years continued to pass in the way years do, bringing changes and challenges, but also joys and triumphs. Tommy married a smart young woman from Santa Rosa in 1895, bringing a daughter-in-law into the family that Zara loved as her own. Emma and Rose both showed interest in ranching, unusual for women but fully supported by their parents, who had never believed in limiting anyone based on gender. Benjamin did indeed become a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch that served not only his younger siblings' children eventually, but also the children of ranch hands and neighboring families. Tom Brennan passed away in 1898, leaving the lazy tea to his children, but also leaving a generous gift to Vance and Zara, acknowledging in his will that Vance had been like a son to him. Mrs. Henderson followed 2 years later at the age of 81, and Zara mourned the woman who had been her first friend in Santa Rosa, her champion when the town had judged her, and a constant support through all the years. But even in grief, there was joy. Grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch house with laughter and chaos. Tommy and his wife had 3 children. Emma married a fellow rancher and had 2. Rose chose to remain single but adopted 2 orphan children who needed a home. And Benjamin eventually married a fellow teacher and had 1 daughter who showed every sign of being as book smart as her father. Through it all, Vance and Zara remained each other's anchor and compass. They still took rides out to their favorite spot when they could steal time away. They still read together in the evenings, though now they often had an audience of grandchildren. They still looked at each other with love and wonder, amazed at how far they had come from that morning by the river when a scared widow and a grieving cowboy had found each other. In the spring of 1910, on their 31st wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration on the ranch. The Rising Sun had grown into one of the most successful operations in New Mexico, now a state rather than just a territory. And Vance and Zara were respected throughout the region not just for their business acumen but for their fairness, generosity, and the obvious love they shared. "Make a speech, Pa," Tommy called out, and the crowd of family and friends took up the call. Vance stood, pulling Zara up beside him, his arm around her waist. At 58, he was still strong and capable, his hair now silver but his eyes as clear and sharp as ever. Zara, at 54, had aged gracefully, her face lined with the evidence of years spent laughing and working and living fully. "I am not much for speeches," Vance began, and the crowd laughed because it was true. But I will say this. 31 years ago, I met a woman by a river. She was alone, scared but refusing to show it, and determined to take care of herself no matter what. I offered my name and protection, thinking I was helping a stranger, but it turned out she was helping me just as much, maybe more. He looked down at Zara, and the love in his expression made several people in the crowd tear up. Zara, you gave me back my life. You gave me love, family, purpose, and joy. Everything good in my world exists because you trusted a stranger by a river. I love you more today than I did when we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you today and always. Zara was crying openly now, and she stood on tiptoe to kiss him, not caring that their entire family was watching. And I love you, Vance Xavier. You kept every promise you made that morning. You protected me, you honored me, you built a life with me that exceeded every dream I ever dared to have. I would choose you again, every single time. The celebration continued long into the night, with music and dancing, and the kind of joy that comes from family gathered together. As the stars came out and the younger children started falling asleep in their parents' arms, Vance and Zara slipped away to their porch, sitting in the rocking chairs they had placed there years ago. "It has been a good life," Zara said softly, her hand finding his in the darkness. "The best life," Vance agreed. "And it is not over yet. We have years still ahead of us, more grandchildren to meet, more memories to make," and they did. They had years more together, watching their family grow and thrive, seeing the rising sun ranch pass to the next generation, and continuing to be each other's greatest love and strongest support. When people in Santa Rosa or on neighboring ranches told their story, and they often did, it became a legend of sorts. The tale of the widow washing clothes by the river and the cowboy who offered his name and protection, and how that simple act of kindness had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime. They died within months of each other in 1921, both in their 70s, both surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved them. They were buried side by side on the ranch they had built together, under a shared headstone that reads simply, "Vance and Zara Xavier. Together they built a life. Together they rest." But their legacy lived on in the 4 children who had learned love and kindness from their example, in the grandchildren who grew up hearing stories about how their grandparents had met, and in the great-grandchildren who worked the land their ancestors had claimed and nurtured. The Rising Sun Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations, each one remembering the love story that had started it all. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the sun was just beginning to rise, ranch hands swore they could see 2 figures on horseback riding out to the high point that overlooked the property. They rode side by side, as they always had, watching over the land and the family they had created, their love transcending even death, eternal as the sunrise that gave the ranch its name.